I'm joined now by Victor Davis Hanson, one of our legendary guests, and now you can get his podcast over at the Salem Podcast Network. It's absolutely a must listen to. Victor, good to see you, and a happy Easter to you if you're celebrating. I got so much to
Thank
cover
you.
with you in 4 segments. Let me start rapid fire. What do you make of Harvard's decision to throw down on President Trump and say we're not changing anything?
Well, they're not quite like Hillsdale. Hillsdale says that regardless of the administration, they will not take federal money because they don't feel that they'll enforce the Constitution. But Harvard's selective. It says we're not going to obey, but we do want federal money, and our policy depends on whether it's a Republican or Democratic administration. When there were Democratic presidents and they went after Hillsdale or they went after Grove City, or they didn't say a word. So they had no problem with the government using federal funds as a lever, or even interfering in private colleges that didn't take it. But I don't think they're going to win this, because once the word gets out about how much their endowment is and their income, I think people won't be sympathetic to this huge conglomerate getting that much federal money anyway. I think
Well, the Supreme Court ruled 2 years ago they have discriminated on the basis of race against Asian Americans in admissions. And the anti-Semitism there is systemic, and we've all seen it. I really don't understand Interim President Garber saying, nah, we're not going to pay attention to the letter we got from the Department of Education. It's hubris, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And they wouldn't, I mean, the federal government, as you remember with Bob Jones in 1970, they went after them and said, if you're having statutes against interracial dating, you're subject to the civil rights legislation, and cut them off completely. And there's a lot of precedent for that. But this is very political. It's when Obama was president, he went after Hillsdale in a way. He wouldn't even include them on evaluations of private colleges for jobs, or the efficacy of majors as far as employment. He deliberately kept them off. Michigan legislature went after Larry Arndt, but Harvard didn't say a word. So I don't think they're even arguing on the principle that the federal government or the state government or any government doesn't have a right to predicate their funding on certain conditions. I just think they think they're Harvard, and I don't know, they think they're above the law. It's part of the old neo-Confederate idea of the sanctuary cities too. We can do whatever we want, and we're entitled to federal funds.
Well, I approve of the Trump administration going after Harvard and Columbia first, because they have the means to defend themselves. They're not being picked on. They're not a small school. They get $9 billion. They have a $53 billion endowment. And I think it's a prudential move by the team Trump to go after them first. Stand by, Victor. We're going to come back live on the network shortly. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. We have connected now with Victor Davis Hanson. Be sure you listen to his podcast over at Salem Podcast Network, because it really is not to be missed. Victor, we're at the artificial point of 100 days. I wrote a column about this for Fox News today, simply because it's such an artificial exercise. I wanted to get ahead of the rush. Let's get your take on Donald Trump out of the gates.
Well, I try to. There's been two presidencies of the 20th centuries that were as dynamic and holistic, and that was the Reagan Revolution and FDR's revolution. And I think, and this isn't really a revolution; it's a counter-revolution. And I think it's more comprehensive and more dynamic than either one of them. I mean, he's addressing every social, cultural, economic, political, military issue that he can as quickly as he can. He's overloading the zone, and everybody said he's herky-jerky, but in fact, he's making his opponents herky-jerky. They don't know what to do, and they're in this Orwellian situation where they're championing as the iconic figures, Mr. Khalil or Mr. Garcia or Carmelo Anthony or Luigi Mangione. These are not people that are going to resonate to the public, but they're desperate. Anything that Trump touches, they're opposed to, and they don't think it out.
Now, Victor Davis Hanson, AOC raised $9 million in the first quarter. And to me, that's one of the facts that sticks out as to where the left in the country is going. They're not trying to move to the center as Bill Clinton tried to move to the center after 3 terms of Reagan and Bush. They're moving to the left. And I don't mean just the left, I mean the far left. Do you think they can put the brakes on that, or have any intention of trying to do so?
No, it reminds me of the McGovern movement that went way out of, they were going to cut, I think they were going to cut half the carriers and give guaranteed income to everybody. And they didn't learn. And they have to go through this trajectory. And I think they're going to nominate a very radical person. And I think they're going to get a lot of great press and money in the primaries, and they're going to lose in the general. And then it takes two defeats. Then they'll come to their senses and, look at somebody like Josh Shapiro or something like that, or the governor of Tennessee. But I don't think they're there yet. I think they would rather be ideologically pure and lose than move to the center and win.
Now, having mentioned Governor Shapiro, Democrat of Pennsylvania, almost killed this week, arsonist in his home. The fire was significant. It burned quite a lot. His family was with him on the night of Passover after they had celebrated Passover. And he's obviously a crazed individual like the person who has shot up Florida State today. We don't know the details of that yet. Is violence being mainstreamed in the way it was in 68, 69, and 70, Victor?
It's very, I was thinking of that. It's very reminiscent because you had people in the Democratic Party that just would not come out and condemn the Weatherman Underground or even the Symbolize Liberation Front. Really,
oh, you're right.
When I was in California, I was remembering how popular they were among Bay Area radicals. I heard them all the time. And the same thing, when you contextualize the Tesla violence, or you take a poll with Rutgers and the assassination of Trump doesn't offend half the people on the left, or there were things that were said about the two assassination Trumps on social media that should never have been uttered. You've lowered the bar. And when you have Tim Walz, when they're using this foul language about Musk or Trump, or they're celebrating the decline of Tesla stock, then it's not very far to go reify that with violence, and that's what's happened. And I think they're playing with fire. I really do.
Well, 10-7 is really a marker for me. That was a dividing, as Douglas Murray wrote in his book, which is behind me. Every now and then a flare goes up and you see exactly where everyone stands. I think that was a flare, and I think we do know where everyone stands after that. Did it illumine much for you?
Yeah, it did. It was not an aberration. If you listen to that Taylor Lorenz interview, that was kind of channeling the ideology of the left's reaction to October 7th. Well, it might have been bad, but you got to look at the whole picture, and that's what they do. But they always condone acts of violence for the greater cause. It seems to me, at least, they do. Nobody really came out on the left-wing base and said, this is terrible, this is horrible. And I was at Stanford University when there were people openly celebrating it on campus. You could see them. They were delighted. And I don't remember, they were violating all sorts of campus statutes. They were camping instead of 24 hours, 4 months. Later, they trashed the president's. There was nobody coming out and say, this is a pathology that you people have no moral compass. They were afraid to say that.
Well, we do have a lot of pathologies abroad. I'm going to talk with Victor during the break and then come back with him after. Don't go anywhere. We have a lot more to cover in Donald Trump's first 100 days. Stay tuned. I'm back now with Victor Davis Hanson. Victor, yesterday the New York Times broke a story allegedly detailing the disagreements in President Trump's team about whether or not Israel ought to strike Iran. I'm very, very suspicious of such stories because the Times has been wrong on Russia, and many other things over many years. They were wrong about Iran's nuclear program when they got fed a bad intel report towards the end of the Bush administration. But assume for a moment that it's true. What cautions and considerations would you advise the president to take into account before he strikes or doesn't strike Iran?
Well, these are tactical decisions. Strategically, during the campaign and in his first 90 days, he's been unequivocal that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And I think, as he did after the reaction with Iran when it attacked some of our facilities, and he canceled a strike. He did kill Soleimani, but he does not like optional military engagements in the Middle East. They interfere with his economic policy, his MAGA agenda. That being said, he's unequivocal. So it's a question of he's going to give them one last chance. Most people, including myself, don't think they're stalling, and he will have to act. But this process of going through it, it may irritate the Israelis for a while, but eventually I think he'll gain independence and middle of the road and say, well, he tried to negotiate with him. He gave him a last chance. And he hopes, I think, by putting the B-2s and Diego Garcia and building up and the tankers to maximize the pressure, and they've got problems with their energy, their budget, the embargo, and he thinks maybe if I let them talk for a while, the domestic opposition, who knows, we might have another green revolution. But I don't think it's going to work, but I can see his logic.
I think he's doing the same thing, by the way, with Putin. And I had this argument with a law faculty member yesterday. He had to beat up Zelensky a little bit to make sure that Zelensky was not identified as the obstacle to peace. It's clearly Putin now. And I actually think it was diplomatically masterful to isolate Putin as the guy who was deciding not to make peace.
Yeah, and both in the past and the present, I mean, if he's serious that he's thinking of having a secondary embargo on anybody who buys Russian oil, that's much more injurious to Russia than anything the Biden administration or the Obama administration ever thought of. And when you look at his history, he sold offensive weapons in the way that Biden or Obama wouldn't. He got out of the missile deal. He killed the Wagner group in Syria. He upped the sanctions. He warned them the Germans not to do Nord Stream 2. He has a long record of being much tougher on Putin than either Democratic administration before. And Putin didn't go anywhere for the only time in 4 administrations during his tenure. But he does this art of the deal where he, when I wrote about him, I read all of those books, and it's the same menu. You cut a deal, and then you try to get 50. You say you want 80%. You're happy with 55. You leave the room and praise everybody and say you got taken or that your opponent was brilliant, but you don't trash your opponent either during or after the negotiations. And that's what he does.
And he's doing it again. Stand by. Yeah. We'll be right back with Victor Davis Hanson, one more segment. Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm with Victor Davis Hanson looking back at the almost finish of the first 100 days. Victor, Congress has quietly and effectively gotten the budget passed. I'm hopeful that reconciliation with all of its major changes will be. The big collision thus far among the branches is between Article 2 and Article 3. And the Supreme Court has handed a couple of wins to the president. They didn't tell him to bring back the Venezuelans. They said going forward, everyone needs a notice that they're subject to deportation and a hearing. But I do foresee a clash where the Supreme Court's going to have to choose either to retreat or to try and go forward. We've only had this happen once before with Taney and Lincoln. What do you think is going to unfold here?
Well, I think they're going to be reluctant, but eventually they're going to act, because if they don't, of the 750 district judges, maybe 400 are left-wing, and they're being cherry-picked. Essentially, some of these judges are adjudicating foreign policy. They're executives, and that was never intended by the founders. So if they don't intervene and say a local district judge cannot, by fiat, basically establish the foreign policy of the United States without an elected executive's ability to do so, it's not sustainable. You'll just have a judicial tyranny, and it will spread because the Republicans will say, just like lawfare, they don't get it, and we're going to cherry pick conservative judges, and we're going to try to shut them down when we're out of power and they have the presidency.
Now, I think among the 6 originalist conservatives on the court, 2 of them are best described as institutionalist conservatives, the Chief Justice and I think Amy Coney Barrett. The institutionalists sometimes go slow, but they also don't endanger the entire court system. District court judges making radical rulings that have to be reversed endanger the entire court system. They destroy the rule of law, and you know the Roman Revolution better than anyone. When the rule of law begins to break down, it's hard to stop it from doing so. And I don't know that these district judges are even aware of the dance they're involved in.
I don't think they understand. I think that's a very good point. I don't think they understand that their authority depends a lot on the prestige they've established over generations, that people respect federal judges. But if they start freelancing and sort of hogging the media limelight, and that you almost get the idea that some of these judges are narcissistic and they feel that they're president or something, they're going to destroy the integrity, but also the reputation. People are not going to have confidence in the federal judiciary, and I think that's already happening. And that we saw that with lawfare, with Willis and Smith and James, etc. And they really destroyed the integrity of, I think, the federal courts somewhat with Jack Smith, but also these local people. And I think that the left understands that if the Republicans were to do that, and people are, I don't think they should, but if they do that, we're going to be in Roman Republic times, as you said. It's going to be a downward spiral of tit for tat until you get lawlessness and chaos. But you know what? It just a final comment. A lot of conservatives will say, well, they don't get it, Victor. You can't deter them. The only thing they understand is reciprocity. You can play by the Marquess of Queensberry rules, but that just empowers them. So I understand that argument too.
But I like the way Trump has said to Laura Ingraham, he's never disobeyed a court ruling. And he hasn't thus far. I wonder if a radical, who will pull back the radical? If a radical finds him in criminal contempt, as Judge Boasberg threatened, or the senior district court judge in Washington State who said birthright citizenship, it's nonsense, it's obviously unconstitutional. In fact, it's a case of first impression. It's never been adjudicated. People have strong opinions. I think birthright citizenship is here to stay, but it's not obviously unconstitutional. It's never been adjudicated. I think the Supreme Court has got to step in, that it's their responsibility, not the president's, to avoid the conflict here. Do you agree with me that?
I do, especially as you say that he's said that he would abide by, he's not going to define the Supreme Court. He's not at all. And he's always said he will follow court rulings. And he's not defying a district judge even now, even as outrageous as it is. He played along. I mean, all of those lawfare things were so outrageous, yet he dutifully showed up in court. He went through the appeals process. He never said, come and arrest me. He never did that. He followed every one of those bogus indictments. And I think that's why he won the election. People said he is a victim of a miscarriage of justice. He played by the rules. They misused them. And I think this is going to backfire just as lawfare did during the campaign and earlier.
So my last question. For 100 years, progressivism has been in the saddle, and the administrative state has grown and grown and grown since Wilson. Donald Trump's had 100 days. He's made it clear he's going to take on the administrative state and try and break it in a number of different ways, including by asserting the authority to replace independent agency heads and a bunch of other things, cut off spending. Do you think he'll win in that confrontation? He's up against 100 years of left.
I asked myself, because Republicanism was Bushism, McCainism. I liked all those guys, Romneyism. And their idea was basically musical chairs. On my watch, I'm not going to really address the debt, the trade deficit, the budget deficits, and the cultural takeover of the institutions by the left. And maybe the music won't stop while I'm president, and then the next guy can deal with it. But Trump was almost eager to be a counter-revolutionary. He was kind of like, these people were Jacobins. They're going to destroy the country. It's gone too far. I'm going to address the DOJ, the government, size of government, every type of debt and deficit, the universities, the immigration, everything, and all at once. And he doesn't have a large legislative majority, and I'm not sure that in all these questions he'll have the Supreme Court on his side. But so it's pretty revolutionary what he's trying. This is a very exciting time to be alive, watching this counter-revolution.
I agree with it. I think it is absolutely without precedent. There's only one figure remotely like him so far outside of the system, and it's Nixon when he came back. And they share a lot in common. You never knew what Nixon was going to do. You never know what Trump's going to do.
Did. I think he's a little bit like Andrew Jackson, too.
Oh, yes.
The Jacksonian revolution against the Federalists and the northeastern bloc on government. And here Jackson kind of blew all that up in a populist.
The first populist. That's why his picture is there. Victor Davis Hanson, good luck at the commencement at Hillsdale next month. I understand it's you and everyone on campus is looking forward to it. Thank you for joining me. We'll continue to check in. Victor's podcast is at the Salem Podcast Network. You should be subscribed. You should be watching it on YouTube. And you should be opining and liking it. Thank you, Victor. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.